So on page 23 and page 24, there is a lab, and that lab is going to be another stamp. So go to your stamp page, and today is probably still the 28th and 29th, but it might not be. You can write whatever today actually is. But the lab on pages 23 to 24 is another stamp you're going to do. And then, oh, you know what? No, you would have probably already done that by now. So actually, you would have done that last class. So instead of the 28th and 29th, it's probably the 2nd and 3rd. Second would be A Day, third would be B Day. And then of course remember that your test will be on the 4th and 5th, so that means that today you'll also have to make sure your test review gets done, which is pages 26 through 29. All of that being said, even if my dates are wrong, these are probably the stamps that Miss Woodlock is going to make sure you get. And after that, I want to talk about this warm-up for the quiz you're taking today. So, let's go to page 25. And on page 25, we have a warm-up for a quiz. If you have not yet had some class time to work on it, then pause this video and do this warm-up, and then I'll go over it. Pause. Okay, and if the video is playing at this point, then you have finished working on your warm-up and you're ready to go over it. So let's look at number 1. It says write a conversion factor, like a fraction, that will properly convert from moles of aluminum to grams of aluminum. So that's our first one, from moles to grams. So they're saying, like, you're going to start with moles of aluminum over 1. It'll be times some other fraction, and the fraction they want, all they want is to know what is this fraction right here. That'll change these moles you're starting with to grams. Remember that whatever they're asking for should be what's on top. So if they're asking you to change it to grams of aluminum, then grams of aluminum should be what's on top here. And what goes up must come down, so if you had moles of aluminum at the beginning, then they should come down to the bottom of our new fraction. As we talked about last time, anytime you're using moles, it should be 1 mole, and your grams should come from the periodic table. So I'm going to put 1 mole here, and then I'm going to go find aluminum on the periodic table. Its mass on the periodic table is 26.98, so that is the number of grams I'm going to write in this fraction. And that's what this problem's looking for, is they just want to know what is this fraction right here. That's all they want. They don't want you to solve it, which you can't because they didn't give you a starting number. They just want to know what would this fraction be. So similarly for part B, they're saying they want to go from atoms to moles. So again, that they're saying that, like, okay, well, you've got some fraction that's atoms of helium over 1, but they want to know what is that second fraction. What is that second fraction? Again, whatever they're asking for should be what goes on top of your last fraction. And this is another, for the bottom, what goes up must come down situation. So if they would have started you at atoms up here, you're going to put atoms down here as well. And again, our number of moles should always be 1 mole. And the number of atoms, when it's blue, you use 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. It rhymes. When it's blue, use 6.02. Similar ideas for part C. I'm not going to work all the way through it, but using, this time starting at green and ending at blue, the fraction they're asking you for, if you were starting at green, then what goes up would have come down here. And since they're asking you for atoms, that's what would have gone on top. Our number of moles, green, is always 1. Atoms, when it's blue, use 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. And again, similarly for part D, this time you're starting at moles and going to grams. So your fraction, you would go from the moles you start with, what goes up would come down to the bottom. And if they're asking for grams, grams would go on top. Whatever they're asking for is on top of your last fraction. We always use 1 mole when we're looking for number of moles, and our golden grams come from the periodic table. 28.09 is our mass of silicon, so I'm going to write in 28.09 right there. Okay, our next section is just some definitions. Molar mass is the blank of blank mole of an element. It is the mass of 1 mole of an element. It is the number of grams in 1 mole of an element. It can be found on the periodic table. And it is numerically the same as the atomic mass for a single atom of 1 element. This is all just some definition stuff that you need to know. I can guarantee you there will be a multiple choice question about these definitions on your quiz. Guaranteed. Numbers 3 through 6 are just calculation problems, so we're going to need our colors again. If we look at number 3, I see the word moles, that's a green word. And I see the word atoms, atoms are blue. And remember, if you see the word moles, you only need 2 fractions. So I'm going to draw my 2 fractions. And I'm going to take what they gave me, a number, a unit, and an element. And that's going to go on top of my first fraction. Number is 6.29 times 10 to the 22nd. The unit is atoms. The element is cesium. If you check your periodic table, cesium is Cs. And that first fraction is always over a 1, just a 1. And whatever they're asking for, they want to calculate the number of moles that's going to go on top of my last fraction with its element, still cesium. Moles are green. To fill in this bottom part, remember, what goes up must come down. So if we started with atoms of cesium on top of our first fraction, atoms of cesium come down below our next fraction. And I know I can only use each color twice. I've used atoms twice. Moles I've only used once. That means the second time I use moles is going to have to be in the answer. In my fractions, the number of moles, green is always 1 mole. Atoms are blue, and when it's blue, you use 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. Once all my fractions are filled out, now I can just multiply straight across, top times top, bottom times bottom, get a new top and a new bottom, and divide. And again, I'll point out that anything times 1 is itself, so what you really end up doing in your calculator is 6.29 times 10 to the 22nd divided by 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. Make sure when you type it in your calculator that you hit that E button. If you don't hit the E button, you are likely going to typo something and get a wrong answer. You should get 0.10 It's like 0.104485, blah, 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 blah. We rounded the hundredths place, and this 4 rounds us down, so it stays at 0.10. Make sure you, again, are typing it with the E button instead of these times 10s here. Otherwise, you might not be getting the same answer as me, which means you'd be getting something wrong. Let's look at number 4. Number 4, how many sulfur atoms are blue, are in 351 grams of sulfur, grams are yellow. Remember, blue and yellow can never touch. If they try to touch each other, they just turn green. So I'm going to have blue, green, and yellow here. I'm going to have 3 colors. That means I need 3 fractions. As always, whatever they gave me, number, unit, element, should go on top of my first fraction. And whatever they're asking for sulfur atoms, that should go on top of my last fraction. Now I just got to figure out the middle. As always, what goes up must come down. So grams of sulfur are going to move to the bottom here. And then I have to ask myself, after yellow, I've now used 2 yellows, 2 grams, can't use grams again, can't use yellows again. We can only use each color twice. Where do I go from yellow? Can I go straight to blue? And if we think back to our notes from last class, can you go from yellow to blue? No. You always have green in the middle. You always have moles in the middle. Always. So, put your moles in the middle. Yellow has to go to green. It's the only option. You try to go from yellow to blue, it's just going to turn it green anyway. We got to go to green. Still talking about sulfur, though. And what goes up still must come down. So we're going to have green moles there, too. That's going to use grams twice, moles twice. Atoms has only been used once, so the second time it gets used must be in the answer. Now I just go back and fill in my numbers. The moles are easy. Remember, anytime we're using green, our green moles is always 1. Both spots. When it's blue, we use 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. And grams come from where? Where do we find grams? We use our mass number, atomic mass from the periodic table. So I go find sulfur on the periodic table. Sulfur's right here. Its atomic mass is 32.06. So I'm going to put 32.06 right there. And now all my fractions are filled out. Back to my calculator. Top times top times top. Bottom times bottom times bottom. Get your new top and new bottom and divide. When you're done typing all that in your calculator, if you have typed all of it correctly, the final answer you end up at should be 6.59 times 10 to the 24th. If you got something different, you're typing something wrong, and you should probably have Miss Whitlock look at your calculator before you take your quiz, so that we can figure out what you're typing wrong, so that you don't get your final answers wrong. Speaking of your quiz, I'd like to remind you that we grade not just your final answer, but also all of your work. If you don't show any work, you get no points. If you only show partial work, you're only going to get partial points. If you're not labeling your units and elements on every single fraction, you're not going to get credit, and you're going to fail the quiz. Don't be lazy. Label all your work. It's not showing your work if you don't label it. It's not showing your work if you don't label it. Label your frickin' work. Alright, let's look at number 5. Radon is a radioactive noble gas. If we find 162.6 grams, grams, that's yellow, of radon, how many moles, moles, that's green, were found? Remember, if you see the word moles, that's only going to be 2 fractions, 1 per color. Yellow fraction, green fraction, that's all you need. The number they gave you and the unit and the element all go on top of the first fraction over 1. They're asking you how many moles, so moles are going to go on top of my last fraction. Whatever they're asking us for goes on top of our last fraction. And this is still radon. This whole problem is radon. And for this bottom part of my last fraction, remember what goes up must come down. So grams of radon are also going to end up on the bottom here. Our number of moles is always 1. And grams come from the periodic table. So I go find radon on the periodic table. Its mass is 222. Now my fractions are all filled out. And again, I'll point out we've now used grams twice. We can't use grams anymore. We're going to have to switch to moles for our answer. Our second time of using moles must be in the answer. And that's also going to be radon. And again, from here, now we're just typing in our calculator. And again, I'll point out 162.6 times 1 is still 162.6. 222 times 1 is still 222. So you're really just doing this divided by that. And if you are typing it correctly in your calculator, you should get 0.73. One problem left. Let's do this. Calculate the number of atoms at a 4.82 mole sample of zinc. Atoms, oh, that's a blue word. Moles, that's a green word. If I've got atoms and moles, blue and green, that's only 2 fractions, 1 fraction per color. And as always, whatever they gave me, number, unit, and element, should go on top of the first fraction over 1. Whatever they're asking me for, number of atoms, that should go on top of my last fraction. And this is still going to be zinc. And again, by now we've probably figured out that whatever's on top of my last fraction, that's going to be what I label my answer. So atoms of zinc, that's going to be what I label my answer. That means the second time I use moles is going to be down here, because what goes up must come down. Alright, moment of truth. What number always goes next to moles? 1. Atoms are blue. When it's blue, you use 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. Now we just multiply. Notice on the bottom, 1 times 1 is going to be 1. And if you're dividing by 1, that's not going to change anything. So really all you have to type in your calculator is this top times top here. And make sure again for that scientific notation that you use the E button. And if you type it correctly, you should get 2.90 times 10 to the 24th atoms. That's it. It's time for your quiz. And then you'll have a test review and you have stamps to work on and all of that. And the next time you watch a video of me, it's going to be another new unit.